Okay, so we are doing part 2 of the Your Unique Soul mini-series, and we're talking about the 2 types of neshamas. So I'm going to give a 2-minute recap, or 3-minute recap to what we talked about last week. Get a running start over here. So you may have heard of this concept of like different types of personalities. People have this type, this number, this letter. The neshama types are much deeper than that. They're not just about like our the way we behave. They're really the essence of our soul. And Jewish identity comes from your neshama. Your neshama, a Jewish soul, a neshama, which is an actual portion of Hashem, is our core identity. But what we've discovered is that there are 2 different types of neshamas. So even though we're all coming from Hashem, there's 2 different missions that we may have. We may have one of these 2 neshama types, and that will define our goals and how we get there. Or you might say that they're the same goal. It's just a matter of defining how we get there. So this applies to all Jews. Like I mentioned last week, the framework of this conversation is about Torah Judaism, because we're going to be talking about mitzvah observance and connection. So you might associate that with, Torah Judaism, Orthodox Judaism. But it goes without saying that the neshama types are for all Jews. You don't have to be religious to have a neshama type. On the contrary, if you actually think about the essence of what a Jew is, you will realize that Jews have way more in common than they have different from one another, because the neshama is the core essence of who we are. So as long as there's a Jewish neshama, the Jewish neshama comes from Hashem. There's no second-class Jewish neshamas, like, I didn't get a good one. No. How we express our Judaism and connect to it, and how that converts to religious observance is a crucially important detail, but our core identity is neshamas, is our neshamas. On the contrary, actually, I would even say that those who struggle with mitzvah observance would do very well to learn more and identify what their neshama type is, because maybe the Judaism they know or don't know is not in line with their neshama type, and that could make for a very frustrating experience no matter who you are, no matter where you're raised. So, this is definitely for everyone. And I also had mentioned that there's no, the Rachel Leah, it's not like the Rachels are this type of Jew and the Leah is that type of Jew. Like one is, Litvish and one is, Hasidish or anything like that. These cross all lines. Everywhere you go, you'll find neshamas that are maybe struggling to connect in every single space in the Jewish world. And what we're going to learn is that understanding our neshama type and how to work with it is literally a lifesaver. So for those people who struggle to connect, this could really be a total lifesaver. For those people who have a very strong tendency towards one side, the Rachel or the Leah, this again could be a very strong lifesaver. If somebody's well balanced between the 2, because we explained that it's not black and white, it's not one or the other. Everybody has some sort of blend between the 2, and everybody has what to learn from the other. It's just that the more extreme you lean in one way, the more challenging you might find life, honestly, and Judaism. Because if you're in an environment where people are very different than you, or they're encouraging you, maybe even pressuring you to connect in a way that's not in line with your neshama type, so that's miserable. It's very challenging. So it's very helpful to know this. But even if you're well balanced, you don't have a strong tendency, understanding how other people are will help the way you interact with other people. So all in all, there's a lot to gain from exploring this idea. Okay, and we also said, just real quick, that don't get caught up in the name. The 2 neshama types are Rachel and Leah. It sounds funny. To anybody I have shared this idea with, it's like, Rachel, Leah? First of all, they're women, so is this for men also? And we're not getting caught up in the name. It comes from this idea we explained last week about the Shekhinah, the divine presence rests within the imahos, and Rachel and Leah were the last 2 of the imahos, so kind of the name stuck with them. But there's 2 different parts of this divine presence and the way we connect to it, and and that's called Rachel Leah. All right, bottom line is, don't worry about it too much. And also, it's a very deep topic that's rooted in a lot of Kabbalistic concepts, but the purpose of the book that we're reading from, which is Biyam Darkecha, on this idea of Rachel and Leah, is taking these ideas and making them extremely practical. So any components to this conversation about where these words come from and why it works that way and how it works that way, that's basically Kabbalah, and that's not our topic. This is just, what do I do with this? How will this help my life right now? How will this help me understand myself? Okay, so the idea is that our mission in this world is to connect the upper and the lower worlds. Our mission is to connect the spiritual world with the physical world. And to some extent, the question is just, which way do we go? Bottom up or top down? The Rachel way is to go top down. That means we're physical creations. We need to focus on the spiritual view, on Hashem, and our job is to bring Hashem into this world. So everything we look at is through the lens of where's Hashem. It's a giant lifelong game of hide and seek. It's like, where's Hashem? Hashem's concealed. He created a physical world that doesn't make his presence very apparent. I'm going to find him. That's my job. That's my mission. My mission is to find him. I find him through mitzvahs, but I can never lose sight of the fact that the purpose of even mitzvahs is to connect to him, to reveal his honor, his glory to the world around me, to myself. So, it's very focused on the real goal. The real goal is revealing the presence of Hashem. The way to get there is through doing mitzvahs, but even doing mitzvahs, it's got to be done with intention to reveal Hashem and in a way that will reveal Hashem. If it's done in a very, cold, shallow way, it's not going to reveal Hashem, then I did not accomplish the goal here. I don't want to say it's a waste of time. It's too strong of a statement to make because mitzvahs have value even if they're not done with intention. But from the feelings of a Rachel, it's not an exaggeration to say that was a waste of time. All feelings are valid, so to speak, as we like to say. So that's how the Rachel may view it. Like, oh, okay, I didn't reveal Hashem. What was the point of this? And we talked about this idea of ar. This idea of ar is light. Literally, it means light, but it means like connection to Hashem. It's a feeling of connection to Hashem. My neshama is connecting with its source. That can be, we use the term ar for that. I got ar from this mitzvah, means like I felt like a real spiritual high, a spiritual connection. The Leah is working from a bottom-up approach, meaning we are the creations. Hashem created us. We are the creations. Hashem gave us a job. What is that job? Whatever that job is, I'm going to do it. So Leah will always ask himself or herself, what does Hashem want me to do right now? What's the mission? What's the mission? I'm in this scenario. What am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? I wake up in the morning. What do I do? I'm going to work. What are the laws I need to follow? The halachas I need to follow. It's very mission-oriented, like Hashem put us here. We need to do what he wants us to do. Whether his presence is revealed, it's kind of his problem. Like, I'm going to do what he wants me to do. What more do you want me to do than doing what you want me to do? Fair enough, right? It's a fair perspective. I'm going to do what you want me to do. If Hashem wants to reveal his presence, kol hakavod, let him reveal his presence as an outcome of what I do, maybe as a reward of what I do. But that's not really part of, I don't really have to be concerned with that or worry about that or focus on that too much. Okay? So these are the basic ideas. And he goes on to say that, first of all, this distinction is revealed in many different ways because it's broader than just spirituality and spiritual connection. The Leah will have more of a focus on intellect and knowledge, and the Rachel on emotion and heartfelt connection. That will reveal itself in various scenarios, not just in service of Hashem, even though that's the primary focus of our conversation. Also, when the Leah does work, he's happy with with the work he did, from the work itself, even if the outcome didn't come out the way it was intended. It's like, okay, but my job is to do my part, to put in the effort. So I'm going to do my effort, and if it succeeds, great. But really, it's already succeeded because my whole job was just to do what Hashem wants me to do. So as long as I try to do that, I'm good. The Rachel, on the other hand, is like, I have an outcome that I need out of this. I need that art. I need that feeling. I need that connection. So if I didn't get it, it's just the Rachel doesn't feel like he accomplished anything. It's like it leads to to not feeling good about the whole thing. And the bottom line is that a soul's got to breathe. A soul's got to be fed what it needs. For Leah, putting in that work, going through these actions, is life itself. Like, that is the greatest feeling in the world. If the way we're describing Rachel, it makes it sound like the Rachel is like always on a high, or always looking for a high, and always like just loving that connection of art. We have to realize the Leah gets it too, just a different way. The Leah gets that fire from following halacha, from doing mitzvahs, from doing what they're asked to do. Without that deeper connection, the Leah is entirely filled up. The Leah is not seeking anything. It's not missing anything. It's only Rachel who doesn't get that feels that something's missing. But Leah is totally filled up from it, totally excited about it. If you see people who just love following halacha and doing what Hashem wants them to do, and doing that to the letter of the law in a very precise way, they're on fire. They're so passionate. It's like, it's so inspiring to see that kind of dedication. Whereas other people are like, on the contrary, they're almost like turned off from attention to detail and such a precise halachic method. It's almost annoying to them. And then this person's like, no, I love this. You're not twisting my arm to make me do it in a very precise way. Like, this is awesome. This is what Hashem wants me to do. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm filling up. So, which one? Okay, now you can understand how these can come to a clash. These come to a clash because it's hard to. It can almost be hard to coexist with such radically different ways. And the way we're explaining these ideas, by the way, we're going to the extreme. We're talking about an extreme Rachel and extreme Leah, but everybody's somewhat balanced. But the way to explain this whole thing would be to hop onto the extreme for the purpose of this conversation. So imagine the extreme Rachel and the extreme Leah. You can see how they drive each other nuts and how it could be hard to coexist. So the question is, it's just like an interesting, kind of fascinating question. Which one can't stand the other more? Okay, if you would take them to extreme and put them in a room, which means put a Rachel in a Leah school, or put a Leah in a Rachel school, like environment, a city, a village, a shul, whatever it is. Which one is gonna go nuts more? So the answer is the Rachel is gonna go crazy, much more than the Leah will. And the explanation for that is the Rachel is looking for the pneumius, the internal essence of what we're looking for. The externals are the way to get there, right? But they're not the goal in itself, but they are the way to get there. The Leah is focused on the external and not as much on the, as we say, pneumius, the internal of that. So which one can exist without the other? So the Leah will look at what Rachel is doing and say, you missed the boat entirely. Okay, I'm sorry. Actually, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. The Leah gets more upset, not the Rachel. The Rachel might be more
stifled.
Yeah, like disturbed or bothered. Maybe, I don't know. I don't want to get ahead. But who's gonna be the prosecutor? Who's gonna pursue the other one down? That's what I meant to say, okay? That's the Leah. Because Leah looks at Rachel and says, you missed the entire point. Our mission is to do, and all you're focused on is this fluffy, vague concept of art. You missed the point of creation. Hashem didn't create us as angels. Like, you missed the whole point. Whereas when the Rachel looks at the Leah, is what the Leah is doing, the actions, is that wrong? No. Not only is it not wrong, It's required because it's the gateway to R. The gateway to the inside is through the outside. If you have no outside, you can't have an inside. You can have a cup with no water in it, but you can't have water with no cup, right? So the Rachel agrees that the way of Leah is correct. The Rachel just says it doesn't end there. Go deeper, go for the gold. The real goal is to use that as a way and fill it up with light. So the way of Leah is more tolerable. The Leah, though, could look at the Rachel and say, what you're doing is not Jewish. You're missing the point. You're totally missing the point. And he goes on to say, a very strong statement here, that if you look at like big disputes, big fights in history, you will find that the Leah is always the pursuer and the Rachel is the one being pursued. And he goes so far as to say that was the dispute between Cain and Hevel. The first fight, literally, in world history, is that Hevel was a Rachel. Okay, Hevel was a shepherd. It's a very spiritual activity. All the others, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, or Moshe, right? They're all shepherds. You go out into the fields and you're watching Hashem's creations. You're focusing on God. You know, that's Hevel. Cain worked the ground, worked the earth. That's a Leah activity. We're here. We're in this world. We're going to work the physical world. And I saw this brought down. I didn't look it up, so I don't know what it's a quote from. It actually doesn't even quote the source. So I don't even know where to look. I have to look it up. But he says that Cain said to Hevel, Parach ba'avir is like sprout into the ear, it's kind of like a way of saying like you're doing nothing. You're doing nothing. You're doing this abstract thing. And he said you're destroying the world because the world loy tayu bara. It wasn't created for nothing. It was created to work. That's another quote. It was created to be worked. So he was upset because he felt that Hevel, who was a Rachel, was just not doing his mission. Okay, we know how that story ended. That was bloody murder. And then he goes on to say that that was what happened by Mechiras Yosef, when Yosef was sold by his brothers. So Yosef was a Rachel. Yosef's mother was Rachel. But I'm not going there because he never really explained how Rachel and Leah themselves were, even though the names come from them. But I guess it's fair to assume that Rachel was a Rachel. Not a bad assumption there. So Yosef was kind of like a Rachel. But whatever, forget that connection of mother-son, because right, no, okay, fine. So, but the point was that he said that the rest of the brothers were Leah's, and they were pursuing Yosef. They had to get rid of Yosef. And he says that many other disputes in history, I think in the back he has a whole chapter where he goes through many of these historical events and explains how one was a Rachel and one was a Leah, and usually it's Leah that's pursuing the Rachel. So that's just an interesting kind of data point. I don't know, it's an interesting perspective. The Leah sometimes can't handle the way that Rachel is doing. Okay, but the bottom line is that we need both of them, because there is no incorrect way. Hashem created two types of neshamas, and the way to serve Hashem is to bring them together. He quotes a verse that says, "Kirachel v'Leah asher banu shteim es beis Yisrael," like Rachel and Leah, who together built the Jewish people. The Jewish people come from both methods of Rachel and Leah. So we have to learn how to understand each other, to respect each other, and even to learn from each other in order to be able to get to shleimus, to the full proper way of service of Hashem, because both are correct. Both are practical. So we need to know the way of the other person, even if we don't need to become the other person. At the end of the day, our goal is not to become, if you're a Rachel, your goal is not to become a Leah. It's a life sentence. It's your neshama. It's your neshama. It doesn't change. Your neshama doesn't change. You're always going to look at something with eyes that are, skewed one way. You're Rachel or you're Leah, because that's who you are. But we need to learn from each other, and we need to balance ourselves a little bit. And that's why it's important to understand the mindset of the other. He gives another example, another spiritual example, the concept of humility, the midah of humility. So what does it mean to be humble in Judaism? It doesn't just mean to be humble in front of your friends, not be a show-off or whatever. It means to be humble before Hashem. So one part of that is recognizing the greatness of Hashem. And the other part of that is recognizing the lowness of us, compared to Hashem. So the Rachel is going to be focusing on Hashem's greatness. It's a top-down approach. So it's like the Rachel will work on this midah by contemplating the greatness of Hashem. Like that's the Rachel's happy place. Mm-hmm. And the Leah will be, no, it's like we're gonna go bottom up. So I'm gonna start from me, and I'm gonna focus on my lowness compared to Hashem. And that's the way to acquire that character trait. Okay, I should mention that as we're talking about all this, and between these classes, you should think about, which side of this pulls you more. And many people listening to this might have already figured out their neshama type in the first 10 seconds. and if that's the case, basically, if you already know what you are based on today's conversation or last week's conversation, then maybe chances are that you're pulling in a strong way towards one side. If both sides of this resonate with you, then you might have more of a balance, which is fine. There's no good and bad. There's only how did Hashem create you. You got to follow the way, the mission of your neshama type in order to feed your neshama what it needs and accomplish your mission in this world. So there's no good and bad. But as we're talking about the soul, you can just see what's resonating with you and which side you feel you pull to more. So today we're going to focus on more practical elements of the nature of each of these neshama types. Okay? Let's start with Rachel. Okay, so here's a very important distinction. We talked about how Leah gets life, gets filled up from putting in the effort and from acting, but the Rachel needs the light, needs the or, needs the outcome of that, of connecting to Hashem and revealing Hashem's presence. So this is going to cause a very challenging obstacle to Rachel. And that is when a Rachel does not get that or out of doing, out of Judaism, then it becomes very hard to do things. So if you're really dedicated to what you're doing, and you're getting paid by the hour, so to speak, then you're fine with doing, even if you don't get R, because it's all about the actions. But if you're looking for R and you don't get it, the actions become very difficult. Okay? We have to understand this. This causes great difficulty. It causes a lack of passion for service of Hashem. On the other hand, when there is R, Rachel is on fire, probably in a more noticeable way than a Leah will ever be. It's like Rachel's on fire, loving it, connecting in a very passionate, heartfelt way. But when that's not there, so all of a sudden they go to the opposite side of the spectrum, and it's like, I don't want to do this. Like, you have to twist my arm to do it. So if a Rachel is very committed to doing mitzvahs, so then they'll do it without that passion. But it feels miserable. It's just like I'm getting nothing out of this. My davening is a lip service, and my my 4 species on Sukkot, I'm just shaking plants. Like it becomes miserable. If the Rachel is I'm adding this on my own, by the way. Like if the Rachel is dedicated enough, then he'll do it. But if the Rachel is not dedicated enough, then he won't do it at all. So a Rachel that's brought up in a very, strong Torah observant community, there's, we do it. We just do it. You like it, you don't like it, you connect, you don't connect, you do it anyway. And that's ideal. That is absolutely ideal. A Rachel should never not do a mitzvah because they don't feel good about it. That's another conversation for another topic. But I'm just saying that the reality is that if hopefully the Rachel is dedicated enough to do it anyway, but the fact of the matter is that sometimes the Rachel is not dedicated enough to do it anyway. And then if they're getting R, then they're doing it. And they're not getting R, they're not doing it. And that could mean violating Torah prohibitions or not doing Torah mitzvahs. It's terrible. It's sad. It's not good. And that's why an important mission of Rachel is going to be to learn how to do even when you're not getting the light. That's a really important conversation. If you are a Rachel that feels that if you don't get light, connection, feeling out of a mitzvah, you don't want to do it at all, then there's a chapter here for you. It's very important to understand what to do next. Okay, we may get to that, but I just want to speak it out. Okay, that's the general idea. The general idea is that the Rachel doesn't know what to do. It's very hard to connect when they're not getting that kind of light. A Leah, on the other hand, okay, even if they wake up in the morning and they're not feeling very spiritual, they're much quicker to do what you got to do. If a Leah is educating a Rachel, is a teacher of a Rachel, is a parent of a Rachel, and the Rachel is like just so burnt out and so not in the mood, the Leah is like, "What's wrong with you? Like you're broken. Like what's going on here? We're Jews. We got to do what we got to do." It's so important for a Leah who's in such a position to understand the nature of the Rachel. That's the first step to helping that Rachel or educating that Rachel. You got to understand the nature of the neshama. If you're just judging it, it's like you're broken. You when you're not in the mood, you just walk away. Then you're not going to be able to help. Like this is part of why it doesn't matter what you are. You got to understand what your neighbor is and your kid and the people around you and the people you're trying to educate. The Leah will say, he says, the Leah will say, like, he doesn't use the word grow up already, but like, get it together. Like, get it together. Just do it. Like, okay, you're not getting R, right? You're not feeling inspired. I never feel inspired. Right? Just a Leah talking. Yeah, I do it anyway. Just do it. But he doesn't understand. Like that kind of rebuke not only falls flat, it's worse than falls flat. Like the Rachel's like, okay, thank you for making it clear that you absolutely don't understand me. That's going to be what the Rachel is going to feel like. Okay, great. So now we're totally not on the same page. Okay, this is fun. This is so real. It's so true. I don't know, for better or for worse, it's so true. So even though the Rachel needs to work on absolute commitment, in Hebrew that's called kabbalas ol, accepting the yoke, accepting the responsibility, there's no pass. There's no pass. If I'm not feeling it, I don't do it. That's not the way of a Jew. It's not the way of a Torah Jew. So for sure, the Rachel's got to work on it. But the first step is to understand that and then work within that. If you ignore the fact that the Rachel needs that light, and now you just try to force Rachel to accept the yoke, accept the responsibility, that leads to a lot of frustration. Goodness, there's like so many things coming to my mind right now. It's like, this is so common, so common everywhere, in schools, in shuls, in organizations, in outreach, literally from one end to the other. This is a very common scenario. And that's why it's so important for a Leah to understand the nature of a Rachel. When a Rachel isn't getting R, it's lights out. It's lights out. It's just done. Like they're dead inside. Their neshama is just feeling empty, and their whole mindset changes, their whole feeling, their mood changes. Even if they push themselves to do it, it's going to be in such like this limp, dead kind of way. So what does that come? So from an outsider's perspective, what does a Leah see in a Rachel? Somebody with, he doesn't use the word bipolar disorder, but somebody who sways from one end to the other really quickly and who seems to be spiritually unhealthy. At one time, they're on fire, they're running to do mitzvahs, they're jumping and dancing, I don't know, whatever. I don't mean that literally, because that doesn't mean that they express in this external way, but just to like kind of profile it a little bit. But like 1 minute they're lit, they're on fire, and the next minute they're like, bleh. They're like forcing themselves to do a mitzvah at best, and like total lights out. It's like, okay, so you're not consistent. You're not consistent. Why can't you just grow in Judaism in a measured way, one step at a time? What's with these extremes? You're holding on to these extremes. 1 minute you're the biggest Rebbe, you're the biggest tzaddik, and next minute you're just like, you're done, you're off, you're totally off. You're done with this whole thing. You can't stand it. You have to force yourself to do it. Again, we're speaking in the extreme terms here. But that's what a Leah might look at it like. Like you just have these big ups and these big downs. So it looks like you're unhealthy, or it looks like that your highs are not authentic. How could that high be authentic if the next day you boom, right back down? It must have been an illusion. But it's not true. That is a failure to understand the nature of the Rachel. That's just not a true fact. That's how it looks if you don't understand the nature of a Rachel. One day he's like all spiritual, and one day he's the most physical. He's the most engaged in worldly temptations or other things, and it's like it seems weird. It seems really odd. He actually says this is also another way that he explains this is the Rachel gone rogue, who's not getting R, is going to seek R from something else. Because, and I think we mentioned this last week, the R of a spiritual high is only available to somebody who has that kind of spiritual sensitivity, which develops over time. Just because you're a Rachel by nature doesn't mean you get these profound spiritual highs. No, if you're a very connected, involved spiritual Rachel, you will develop that. But until that's developed, and that's important to emphasize, because there's Rachels out there who might be like, what do you mean? I don't get that deep spiritual high. Okay, you have to get there. There's a process to developing that spiritual sensitivity. The way to start is by just learning B'yam Darkecha all day, every day, on every topic, every volume. Just start. Just open one up and start, and you'll start developing that exactly. But what I'm getting at with this is that when a Rachel's not filling up from an R of spirituality, they're going to look for an R of something else. And the same thing that's pulling towards like Hashem and revealing Hashem can pull them to get a high from something else. You could kind of compare it to, what's that part of you that gets a high in your brain? When you get like stimulated.
Dopamine.
Yeah, dopamine. Okay, dopamine, right? So we all know in the world of like relationships or other things, there's healthy ways to get dopamine. They involve more work, like putting in effort and then getting a satisfying result is the best dopamine rush. But we also know you can go smoke something, you can go take something that will give you this like temporary high, right? So the same thing that you're seeking in a authentic, meaningful way, you can get in an inauthentic way. So I'm just using that as an example, that craving for R, the way to get it is by connecting to Hashem, but the Rachel gone rogue is going to seek it in physical pleasures. So that same R, like They want to feel, they want to connect, they want to get a high. Maybe they're involved in temptations, whether it's food or it's relationships or buying things. Who knows? There's many ways you can get that rush, and that rush is mischanneled R. So that's part of why it's not only that the Rachel, when they're not filling up on R, might just be like kind of dead inside, but they might be pursuing lots of things in this world. Like they're chasing, nonstop chasing pleasures. That's what you might find as well. And the problem is, obviously, that they're not going to find what they're looking for in any worldly pleasure. It's going to be salt water. When you drink salt water, you get more thirsty. So then you drink more salt water, and then you get more more thirsty. That's the Yetzer Hara is always offering salt water, always offering a fake that just makes you want more. So the Rachel is at risk of getting caught up in this endless, vicious cycle of temptation in their pursuit of R, in their pursuit of light. Okay. Let's see if we should do another part or two. He talks a little bit how they're always, a Rachel might like jump from R to R. Like if you want, I guess as a comparison, some people might get pleasure out of working and because they feel good that they're doing what they need to do, and some people might get pleasure out of results. So if you get pleasure out of results, then you have no pleasure in the process. And if it fails, you're frustrated because your whole goal was not accomplished. If this could apply a lot in work and all kinds of work things. Many working spaces that you're in might involve doing projects that might never see the light of day, like especially creative things or ideas. It's like, no, they don't see the light. So how do you act towards that? If you love the process, then you get the high from that. But if you love the result, then you're just about that light. So then when you're not getting it, then you're pretty broken. And when you get it, you're kind of ready for the next one, and maybe a little frustrated with the process that you need to go through until you can dig it out and